Well, I got 8:30, so I think it's time to start. I want to first off welcome and thank you all for getting up early in the morning to come over to this session. This is something I'm really passionate about, is the idea of connecting using older equipment, and also the idea of maker spaces, which is something that is something else that I'm really care deeply about as well. The idea that you can make a space and have it for creativity is something that, going back to when I used to run the MIDI lab at one point, that was a great, at the time, I don't think we had something called a makerspace idea, but that's basically what it was. And so many people came in and were able to create. And the lab I taught in, I had a lot of music majors, but I had a lot of non-music majors, and a lot of them actually went on and had nice careers in music. They were able to. There's one gentleman that's currently going around in the country area. I didn't at the time. He was making hip hop music, so I didn't see that switch, but he got to Texas country. And several other artists have come through. Some of them have some recordings, and all coming out of that little MIDI lab, back in the day and whatnot like that. And so I'll just kind of dive through here. And I teach at SFA, and we have a couple maker spaces. And this particular maker space here is the one that's open to all the students. There's a STEM one, and the STEM building, basically, in the math science area, that's more geared towards the sciences. But this one here is geared towards everybody, and so it's really cool. And I'll show you a couple of pictures of that, just kind of give you all some ideas. So I guess first off, before I dive into it, any of you are involved in any maker spaces or any areas that you use technology and have folks create things, which is basically a maker space to me? A couple of y'all have some labs at least. And if not, hopefully after this little lecture that encourage you to go out there and to either create a makerspace, or at least think about making an area for young people and for students to be able to go out there and use their creativity as well. Happily, a couple of years back, I was named the Makerspace SFA Makerspace Fellow, and that was a great honor for me to go in there and work with the faculty, work with students to find some ways to integrate the makerspace into classrooms. And some areas, really in a lot of aspects, if you're really innovative, you can find a way to use 3D printers, podcasts, even sewing of books and things like that as well. There was like one English class, they actually made it where they could go through and they made their own book and actually made their own bindings of books. So all that type of creativity. And for me, throughout my whole lifetime, the idea, like, I don't know if some of you all might be the same way. I majored in music, but I dabble in film, I act, I do a lot of things. And so it's not just one reason why I went and got an MFA in cinematography was because I wanted to learn how to write films, music for films. And I figured if I make films, I'll understand how to write music for it better. And so I think in some aspects, my unique area, and I'm not the only one unique, the idea that all this creativity, my writing, my acting, my films, my music, all combined together and makes me the creative person who I am. And I think the idea of going in there and thinking, oh, well, someone's making some stickers, someone's making some buttons, someone's making sewing something together. It all connects together with this creativity. Someone's making these little figures for some of their table games, and people making board games with a wood burner. And so it's really fascinating in a lot of aspects. So for me, is music part of a makerspace? And really, for when they first were pitching this idea of having a makerspace, I went to the folks that were organized and said, "Hey, you all got a place for a lab, for a music lab?" And they were like, "Well, we hadn't even thought about it." And I said, "Well, I got a skill set. I used to do MIDI labs back in the day, and what I would find, a lot of students would basically gravitate towards that lab that were looking for a space, looking for somewhere to create, looking for somewhere to get their, find their cohort of fellow students. and a lot of amazing music. And I know I think this was a picture of a photo back in the day, but that was the computer lab that I was over at one point. You see like an Apple II monitor there hooked up to one of these Roland samplers back in the day that I think it had a whopping, oh golly, what was it? Was it even like 8 seconds of sample time on a floppy disk? It was something like that. And it was, we made whole drum kits back in the day just with that. And yeah, it wasn't very intuitive to use that particular one, but once you learn how to use it, it worked out fine. But look at the big monitors there. When I got there, oh, there's even like the classic twos still there. So that was back in the 90s for sure. Versus this little area here, you can see the little launch pad there. This was one of my old Squire guitars that I just said, well, put it there, and they're saying, oh, I don't think anybody's going to use it. Apparently, some kids just go in there and just jam on the guitar on GarageBand. So just because they just want to play guitar, and I think that's a great great idea in a lot of aspects. So the idea to me, and I went through and looked up a couple of areas to define what a makerspace actually is. It's a physical location where people gather to share resources, knowledge, work on projects, network, and build. And I think a lot of those aspects, and network's a really big part for me there. But the sheer knowledge and resources, none of us are experts on every single thing. And I'm a guitar player. I'm not much of I can keep time on drums, but I wouldn't call myself a drummer at all. I can noodle around on the bass, and I'm an okay keyboard player. I'm an okay singer. But there's other folks that are great singers. So we collaborate all the time. We probably don't really even thinking about that, hey, you're a lot better on drums. Why don't you do that? And I can play bass, or I can make this or whatever. I think that's really great. Here's another one here I thought was interesting. Makerspace is a unstructured fabrication lab outfitted with a variety of tools, software, materials appealing to a spectrum of interests, and sometimes called a hacker space or a fab lab. And I think that's kind of ideal. I love that term hacker, because back in the day when we would fool around with computers, you thought you were really cool if you could do something that someone else couldn't do. A lot of script kiddies were out there in the day, so basically someone that would just take someone else's code and use it and claim it was, well, they thought they were cool because they could do that. Another one here, a makerspace is a place where students can gather together to create, invent, tinker, explore, and discover using a variety of tools and materials. And I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but I guess I can mention it now. You think of all the skills that we want our students to use, and the idea of the arts, the idea of the creativity. And I think today I'm not going to talk about AI. Almost every session I went to today, everybody just spent so much time on AI. I think it's important, it is, but when you get right down to it, I think for a lot of us, the hands-on tactile area is what we like. I want to be able to make a beat. I want to be able to record something. I want something that's a physical copy. Not that I don't think AI has a place, not that I think AI is not going to change everything. And I think back at the beginnings of GarageBand, because I majored in music, I knew something was in the key of A, and I'm in the key of E. It was smart enough to take a loop and change it to that key without even thinking. I thought, well, that's pretty slick. That's really great. And it was smart enough not to do that with a drum beat, because I just needed drums or just drums. So, and going back to, spell check back in the day and what like that. So we've had the beginnings of the AI for a long time, but it's definitely been a buzzword. And I think it is important, but it's a tool like anything else. If it's going to help us create, invent and tinker, I think that's fine. And define these materials as well. So a couple little goals today is basically hopefully that you can learn how to put some makerspace in music education, and the idea of I like putting the arts into STEM, and so you can, if you do have a makerspace or you have a science area, that you could basically say, hey, what about the arts? And I often think about this, that the folks that were going to be kings and nobles, they studied music. A lot of them were amateur musicians, so they studied languages and literature and history and whatnot like that. And I wonder, why did they think that music was so important for a leader to have? And there must have been a reason why. And of course, I know all of us advocate for music education, or else we wouldn't be here. So that idea of making sure the arts are an important part of any type of STEM area. The idea of starting a makerspace. I think all of you, since you all are, a lot of you I'm sure are part of Time, You understand how to hook together computers and keyboards and things like that. And so you get a skill set that you could offer to a library, to a computer lab, to be able to put some, take some older technology, in this case here, or newer technology if you can afford it, to be able to make a makerspace. I think that's something that's great. And I also the idea of recycling technology. This one I know it's a little bit harder for folks in public school, but I bet somewhere there's a bunch of Chromebooks, or somewhere there's a bunch of older computers not being utilized, and you could put a distro of Ubuntu and re-energize those. Maybe you have older iPads. Well, guess what? GarageBand worked on the first generation of iPad, and you may have to plug them in because the batteries are gone, but you can still use that. Same thing with any MIDI keyboard from 82, 83. Go back, and if you can find you a profit, let me know, because I like to have it. But you can connect that today to a computer, to current computer today with a MIDI interface. Maybe it's not as easy as hooking one of the, what I call a printer cable, into the computer from that, or now Bluetooth. But still, it still would work, and that profit sounds great. I'm thinking about Take On Me sounds, and I love those old retro sounds. Well, not even retro; they're not retro to me. And also the idea of how to repurpose this old outdated computers. And the one thing about Makerspace, you don't necessarily have to have it hooked up to the internet. I think that's one of the big problems for a lot of the folks in IT, that, oh, someone's going to hack it. Well, you know what? It's not plugged in. No one can hack it. If you're just using it for Audacity, if you're just using it to make a podcast station, it doesn't matter. And the idea for this, when I used to run the MIDI lab, I was told, be a good steward of the money. So I wouldn't every time something new came out, I wouldn't change it right away, because I had to buy 12 copies of it. And so I would maximize the software that I use. And I'm going back to the floppy disk days. And so it was a little bit different. Today, I know everything just updates every day. But, some of the big softwares, if you would have told me this time last year that Finale would be end of life, for a lot of y'all, I remember the first time I used Finale, it was one measure on a oh golly, it was like a Mac SE or something like that, and it was very slow and clunky, and it was like almost like trying to figure out how to fly the space shuttle or something, and it kind of grew to what it was. And I'm sure for a lot of folks that was I was shocked when I read that, like, golly. I was a fan of an old piece of software that from Passport Designs called Encore. I don't know if anybody ever played around with Encore. And supposedly the guy that made the code rebought the rights to that, and is now currently updating it. So I'm hoping maybe next year. He's been working on it for a couple of years, so hopefully by next year it might be out there as well to use. And then the last one here, the power of using older technology to revolutionize this music creation as well. Just to show, and for a lot of you all know this, and this was a Radio Shack ad from, I guess, somewhere in the 90s there, and I made a joke that well, I wasn't the one that originally came up with this, but basically everything you can do on that table there, you can do on your phone. And I'm a big Star Trek fan, and I don't know, somehow I tweeted it out to William Shatner back in the day, and he actually responded back. And that was a cool moment for me, being a big Star Trek nerd. But you think about it, you got a keyboard there, a computer, a phone, a speak and spell, a camcorder there, a calculator. I remember, don't use a calculator because you'll never have a calculator with you, and we all walk around with calculators and lights and video recording things of this in our pocket now. And in a lot of aspects, to me, if you would have told me that all this stuff here I could use on one device in the future, you wouldn't like, what kind of device would that even be back then? Because you can understand how apps would work. That I wouldn't need a tuner. There's an app that can, as long as I can get sound, I can have a tuner and a synthesizer and everything else going on. So to me, that was pretty fascinating. So I think in a lot of ways, I don't know, have you heard much about makerspaces in your all's schools? It's kind of a little bit of a buzzword. A couple of years back when I started diving into this research into makerspaces, it seemed to be that was kind of a little bit of a buzzword for a while. Now AI is the big buzzword that everybody's talking about, and they probably should. But there's a lot of benefits for students again, and the idea to expand creativity outside the classroom. I think in a lot of aspects that there was a line in Star Trek kind of referring back to the most important things that Captain Picard learned was outside the classroom, and basically he was telling that to Wesley. And I think about that yeah, a lot of the transformative experiences that you have in college, you go to class, you should go to class and pay attention, but it's going to the practice room, it's collaborating with others, these experiences that are going to give you a lot of benefits. And you think about the employers, one reason why I think they like musicians so much is because we can sit in a practice room 8 hours on one measure, and we have that kind of dedication. So whatever job we do, we can focus. And I think in a lot of ways for us that got through with music degrees, that we started something difficult and we finished it. I mean, playing a big senior recital or writing a composition for that, that's a skill that not everybody has. I take it for granted that I've written a symphony. I take it for granted that I can score films. A lot of times I forget that folks don't think in triads or scales and keys. So I think those benefits outside the class are just very powerful in a lot of ways. And the idea for gifted and talented students, I'm not sure they even use that term anymore, but they kind of had that when I was a kid. That was I think in a lot of ways the resources just aren't there. And really, once you set up the lab, when I used to teach the electronic music classes, really honestly, I would teach like 5 minutes. I would show them a concept and then just turn them loose and walk around and answer questions, because I didn't need to lecture for the whole 45 minutes. I want them to get hands-on and try that. And when I went to film school, that was kind of the mindset was, all right, here's a camera, go make a film. And wasn't very good, was it? All right, next one, a little bit better. And at some point, like, yeah, that's actually kind of watchable. And versus like, oh, you read all this theory and watch all this stuff. And there's other schools that use that as a concept. And you finally make your film, and like, it wasn't very good. It was a little better, but it wasn't as good. The idea that you go out and make a bunch of pottery versus studying pots, and if you do 5,000 pots, you're going to know what you're doing. That 10,000 hour rule, I think that does affect us a lot in music as well. And also like at-risk students as well. I think of a lot of ways you put together a computer lab for students as an incentive to go make beats. And even going back, if all you have is a computer with Audacity, you can do a lot with Audacity just by itself, especially if you can't afford that. And if you can get an old Mac, and that's one reason why I advocate for like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old Macintosh, it still works with GarageBand, and you can still download it. It may even have it on there when you install the operating system. And to me, it's a very powerful DAW for just the price of an old Macintosh computer if you have that. So some of the stuff I already talked about in some aspects encourage that innovation and creativity there. And this was a little area back there where someone made a Boba Fett or Mandalorian helmet and a bunch of other stuff out there as well. So the idea that when I was working with them when they were putting together the Makerspace, it says, what I'm really interested is, once we have these tools available to the students, what are they going to be able to do with it? So to me, that's the powerful part, is that I don't know. I don't know what kind of innovation will come out of that. The idea of being able to 3D print dentures for people that can't afford that is fascinating to me. And the idea of being able to 3D print a lot of instruments. I think perhaps this probably will happen. Someone will make a new instrument. If you think about this, the saxophone at one point was a new instrument. And I look at the launch pad. To me, that is an amazing device. It's a new instrument. I see young people on TikTok or whatever just jamming on it, doing all sorts of amazing things with it. And you can't tell me that there's not skill there. There is a lot of skill with that. So, but we don't think of it as an actual instrument because it's electronic and has lights. So it's just something a little bit outside the people's world boxes there. So here's a couple of robots that I was playing around with and mouthpieces, and to show that the hands-on learning bridges the gap between theory and practice. So now you can draw something, you can make something, and actually have a tangible object. So if you want to make a new keyboard, you want to make a new ukulele, you want to make a new recorder, one of the things that I would experiment around, I'm not really a brass player, but I made a mouthpiece and just made it as shallow as possible and see what happens. All right, that sounds horrible. And play around with inside the shank as well and see what you can do with that and say, oh, there's probably a reason why they designed it the way it is. And so, but you could tinker around, you could put a tuba, a bell on a trumpet mouthpiece shank and see what happens. And, you know, something's going to happen. It may not sound great, but it'd be interesting. We're going to hear somebody buzzing over there as well. And the idea also like this, that I think in higher education and probably public schools the same way, that, you know, we don't get a chance to fail. I have failed a lot in a lot of aspects. And, you know, working on the degrees that I have, I look back and reflect, yeah, that was a bad paper. You know, and if you just gave up, that's, you know, that would be it. One business person told me this, and I always kind of kept it in the back of my mind. He says, you know what the difference between someone who's successful in business and someone who's not? And I said, no, 4 or 5 bankruptcies. And I said, really? He said, yeah, you start a business, you don't know what you're doing, and it fails. And next time, it lasts a little bit longer, and third or fourth time, you finally got it. Most people think, well, I went in business, I'm not a business person. But if we did that in music, man, you know, I couldn't play that scale, I'm not a musician. But you have to just keep on going. You can't fail. You can't just give up. And that resilience is important, and persistence is such a big part of being able to create things. And I think a lot of the times, reflecting back on the computer labs I used to work in, they would try a beat out, and I would go mention, say, well, you know, at some point you can't save it. You know, you learn from that and go on to your next project. Or maybe you can save it, or maybe you can do something with it later on. Maybe part of it you can use. But the idea of failure, I think in a lot of aspects, we think of the word failure. At least if you tried, you're a failure. If you didn't try at all, you're nothing. And so, you know, and I think of our system of, you know, an F is 50, right? Or 59. Golly, most things in life, if I can do 59% better, then it's great. If I can speak, you know, French 59% better than I can right now, that's great. You know, that's awesome. Fix cars. If I can play piano, even like 4% better, I'd be like happier. So, you know, only in our system that, you know, 59 is failure, you know. So it's I remember one of my teachers said, I don't know what a number means. And I kind of agree with that in some ways. So you can kind of see a regular mouthpiece, and the one on the, I guess you're right there, that I was experimenting with, and yeah, I didn't really sound too good. So, but it was cool. They have to add these critical thinking skills and whatnot. And I think in you know, in the sciences, that's a big part of what they do. They try things and things fail, and in music we can do the same thing. The idea that, you know, students are able to analytically and solve complex problems. We often don't think that in music, because it's such, for a lot of us, it's just so intuitive. But yeah, you take a piece that you're learning, you take a composition you're working on, there's a lot of things going on. That's a great skill for students and whatnot like that. So beyond the academics in the 21st century, the idea is that collaboration, communication are emphasized, and really equip students with success in this evolving world as well. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things, even though this is kind of more, obviously we're geared towards music. I think the idea of understanding Tinkercad and Thingiverse, you can go and find mouthpieces and ukuleles. So what I talked about script kiddies earlier, and what a script kiddie was, someone hacker would make a code, and they would put it out there, and people would say, all right, I can just use that. Well, in some ways, if you go to Thingiverse, you're kind of like a script kiddie. You got a mouthpiece. So you download that, and you can just print that out, and that's cool. But you can take that file, open it up in Tinkercad, and you can manipulate it. Like the mouthpiece, I didn't design it from scratch. I'm not good enough with the Tinkercad to do that yet. But I can take that script and manipulate it, and then print it out and see what happens. And so I think that's a cool idea that you can do. And mouthpieces, or you can do clarinet mouthpieces, and obviously the brass instruments. I've seen ukuleles, I've seen guitars, a lot of ocarinas and recorders and things like that. But anything that you can make with metal or wood, you should be able to be able to 3D design. And they got different filaments as well that you can go through and something like carbon fiber, so they can be very, very strong and very, very light. And so there's ones you can that was a PLAs. They have different PLAs that you use. Some of them are like a ball, so they're really soft. And some of them are, anyways, they have a lot of different things you can play around with that. So I think that's a cool idea to be able to go explore with that. And even for folks that are, you're not really thinking about, well, is this really, is this music based? I think it is, to be able to go through there and do that. So this is what Tinkercad looks like. I'm just going to close the door real quick because it sounds great. So this is what Tinkercad looks like. And basically, you have these little boxes and circles, and you put them together, and there's negative space and positive space. And if you don't know any of that, well, you know what? I didn't either. And you can go watch some videos on YouTube and learn about that. If you show this to your students, just turn them loose. I'm sure they're going to come up with some cool things. And they actually got tutorials as well to go through and learn how to, make various aspects of things. So those concepts you can use later on. So, one of your students could come up with a new idea, a new instrument, or tweak a mouthpiece. And any of these files here, you can send to a metal company, and they can make it out of metal or brass or whatever else, because it's just a file. So it doesn't matter if it's plastic or whatever it's going to be. I'm going to guess you see those trumpets and trombones made out of plastic. I'm assuming they're probably just a form that a file that they made themselves. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but the idea that STEM education enhanced all this problem solving that I talked about in cognitive performance as well. And there's actually some research that goes along with that as well. So keep that in mind when you advocate for making a makerspace. So let's talk about the idea of makerspaces. And now the reason why I throw the idea of podcasting there, for a lot of the folks, they may not understand why you'd want to have a music station, but the idea to record audio. And if I ask you all some reasons in public school why someone would want to record audio, you probably can come up with some. It enhanced reading. You can come up with some type of a project instead of writing a paper. You can do like a short little documentary and things like that. So if you advocate for a makerspace with music, you can also say, well, we can do podcasts along with it as well. Like, ooh, that was a big part of that as well. And for me, being someone that has to buy old equipment or uses old equipment, the idea of recycling old computers and MIDI equipment has been really fascinating to me as well. So anyways. So I'm going to just show you a couple of pictures of some older equipment there. This is a Surface 3. I think I picked it up for like, I don't know, 60 bucks off of eBay, something like that. And it's a PC computer. And the launch pad, I got that probably half price from a new version of it, maybe even less than that. And then down there, I love the old the 2011 MacBook Air. I love that one because I have a lot of the old, from previous computers, the power supplies worked without. When you get to 2012, they had a newer power supply that I didn't have a lot of. And that computer, even though it's like 4 gigs of RAM, it's a pretty good little powerhouse for GarageBand. I make a film every year. The film I made, and not 24, but 23. I scored it on that computer just as a proof of concept. Yeah, that I can still score films with 15-year-old computer using GarageBand as the DAW. And really, I didn't have any problems with it all. Now, again, it wasn't a very complicated soundtrack. I recorded a bunch of guitar parts and then had some nice little padding going on. But the one thing I actually like about those, they actually have the traditional USB connector, so I don't have to worry about the USB-C. I love USB-C, but I wish they would put a couple of the old ones on Macs because most of us probably got a lot of that equipment there. And you know, you have a 2010 Mac and so forth that it will work 2009 as well. So I actually kind of just showed you like some of the old equipment. I love the 2012 MacBook Pro because that one is one of the last ones you can actually expand. You can put as much memory in it. You can change the hard drive out. You can change out the battery. So I picked up one at a pawn shop for $50, and you know, a little under $100, had a really powerful computer, and it had Thunderbolt, and it had USB-C, USB 3 as one of the USB ports. And anyway, so that was a really powerful computer that I used for a long time, really until 2020. That was one of my main computers before I bought this computer here, the M1 computer. And by the way, I'll be honest with you, the M1 is fascinating. The M2 and M3, that silicon chip from Apple is fast, like really fast. It doesn't work with some of the old software, but you know, the new processors in the Macs, the Mac Silicon, the Apple Silicon is just really fast. For $300 you can buy the Mac Mini, and I bought one of those recently as my main editing computer for Premiere. And just using even this 8 gigs of RAM, it was fine. And I think I've seen that like the M4 version for $600, and from what I've read and heard, it is a powerhouse. So if you can afford that, and again, $600 a day is not that expensive for a computer. Most of us have monitors and keyboards and mice anyway, so you can recycle that part as well. So anyways, you can see some of the older equipment that I use. And with Chromebooks, you have to obviously use mostly online software. I know there's a lot of sessions that they actually talk about how to specifically use a Chromebook. The newer ones that you can use, Android apps, give you a little bit more flexibility because there are some nice apps for Android that you can use with those as well. So all these I can use to make music. And this little keyboard here I got off of Facebook Marketplace for $40. It's a little Casio keyboard. I like it. It has a little handle on it, so you can walk around with it. It's not touch sensitive, but you know, it's all right. You know, it's $40. What do you expect? So it was fine. So if I'm doing some synthesized stuff, it's not a problem. But that was kind of fun. And once again, I already mentioned this before, GarageBand's free on any Mac computer. And if you have a current Mac computer, if you have an older iPad or phone, it says, hey, this new version doesn't work with it. Would you like to download the old version that would work, the oldest version that worked with it? And say yes. And so for me, since I've been, used GarageBand forever, any computer I got, when I log in with my Apple account, I can just download that. And same thing if you got you may not be aware with Apple, I believe it's still the case, it's $200 for Logic and Final Cut, and I forgot what else, but it lasts for a pretty good long period of time as well. So the one thing about GarageBand that's I call it Logic's little brother, and so once you understand GarageBand, you can move over to Logic pretty easily. And we talked about Audacity, every platform, including Linux, Mac, PC, and Linux, you can actually use that. Ableton Live, if you get you an older keyboard, if you log into it and you register it, a lot of times you can just download that for free. And Ableton Live Lite is relatively powerful. It does up to 8 tracks, and for most folks that should be enough. And then FL Studio used to be called Fruity Loops. It's not too expensive as well. So all this older computers and technology, you can still use that as well. PCs, again, Audacity, Ableton Live Lite. And so if you get one of these older launch pads, a lot of them had that software bundled with them. The other day, I picked up a little keyboard at a pawn shop for $20, and I registered it, and I was able to download some software that would work with. I can't remember the name of the software right off the bat, but it was interesting. It was something I haven't played around with yet. So keep that in mind. If you get older equipment, you may still be able to log on and download the software that was bundled with it. I remember back in the day we had to get all these CDs that came with things, and now happily It's online. You can just download it for that. So there's a Surface 3 running Ableton Live Lite there, and it works fine. It works really well. I won't dive into this a whole lot, but the idea that you can actually get an old computer, and for a lot of y'all that have a warehouse of older computers, you can revive an old PC computer by putting a Linux distribution on it, and they actually have a specific a Linux distribution called Ubuntu, and Ubuntu Studio, and you go find that, and it has the all these apps just built into it, so that you don't have to download separately. Now you can take a regular distro of Linux and install your own software that you want. So if you want to put Audacity on it, most of them come with Audacity anyways, but anything that you want to install. But this is a specific one, and it's quite fascinating. I can see that if you want to build a small little music lab with 6 or 10 computers, and you have that, you'll be able to make that happen as well. Yeah, photography. Yeah, so it's and it works basically. I don't know, I want to say it's at least twice as fast. It could be 4 or 8 times as fast as yeah, because Windows and Mac in some ways is really bloated. So it's if you feel like if you got a little bit of a, and most of y'all probably are because you guys are here in the technology areas, willing to tinker around. I think you'd be quite pleased with that distribution if you can't, especially if you get a PC that doesn't have a licensed operating system. And so this is a free distribution for that. Yeah, Ubuntu. Yeah. I do want to mention this as well, and I talked about this earlier. If you don't hook it up to the internet, hopefully your IT wouldn't care about it. And there is security concerns because of that. And so you may not be able to use the internet to install things, but what you could do is get a current computer, get that software, put it on a thumb drive, and then connect it that way, install it that way. So it's not, and when it breaks down, let's be honest, it's older. The IT folks probably wouldn't fix them, support them. But for me, at least on the Mac side, it either breaks right away or lasts forever. And that's been, I don't know if any of y'all feel the same way with the Macintoshes. So if it gets past a couple of months, I'm like, yeah, this is going to last. The computer I got here, this M1 I bought for myself in 2020, you know, 5 years later, it's still pulling along great. I would buy another one, but this works fine. So I don't need to purchase another one for myself. And the other thing, it is slower. However, if your students have nothing, Audacity works good on any computer really in the last 20 years, or you can find an older version of Audacity that would work. So keep that in mind. I know the IT folks, and I understand their concerns because there are valid concerns. But if you don't have it connected to the internet, that shouldn't be, their concerns should be alleviated with that. And I kind of already mentioned this as well. There's a lot of, probably in your school district, you have a lot of older computers you can get for almost nothing. They're just given to you. And even if you got 20 computers, you're going to get 5 of them to work by putting them together. That's something there. And then also, there's a lot of free software available for them. And I like this part here. There's a lot of old software like OS 7 stuff, OS 9 stuff, OS 6 stuff from Mac that didn't ever support, never took it from what it was. And there's a lot of 32-bit software that doesn't run on these 64-bit processors. So I keep a couple of old Macs at home for myself for a couple of the specific softwares that I just can't get. And you can run an emulation, and sometimes they work really well. I got one of the old synthesized software that actually worked decently on emulation, but sometimes it doesn't work as well on emulation. So I always like bringing this up, the idea of what a hacker is. And have you ever saw anybody that could take an engine out of a car and then put it back that same day? And they probably know that engine better than the person who designed it. To me, that's what a hacker is. For me, when I was teaching the music computer labs, I would know the software so well, I wouldn't have to see it. I can just say, go to file this or edit this or whatever, just because I use it so much. I knew there was a couple of versions of GarageBand I knew probably better than the people that designed it, and I knew what to do with that because I just had used that software so much. And for a lot of us, we probably have software or computers that we just know so well that we know that we actually know it better than the people who actually designed it. I'm sure there were folks out there that knew Finale better than the folks that put it together because they just spent so much time, or this one specific area of it. So for a lot of us, we are hackers that we know something so well better than who made it because we use it so much as well. And this is I'll talk about this a little later on, but there's a Commodore 64 there. And one of my areas of research is what I call computer archaeology, where I take old technology, make videos, and show people how to use the Commodore 64 while I'm still alive. So if anybody has any interest in how to make music later on with that, or something from OS 6 or 7 or whatever, because I was there when it was going on. This particular research here took me years because I couldn't find a MIDI interface. And finally, I found one on eBay for $50. And I was finally able to get that together. So, and not using a floppy disk, they actually make a little SD card floppy that hooks up to the old hardware. So it was kind of fun to do that. I was just showing some other technologies and things like that as well. So, anyways, all the things that we do with the computer, current computers, MIDI, podcasting, recording audio, video editing. An old computer can do all that. And I used to make a joke that a 1-bit computer can do everything a 1,000,000-bit computer can do, just slower. So it doesn't, if you can wait a little bit, it's not, you can use it. And I used it for all those things back in the day. So all this stuff you probably have talked about before, have seen a lot of this software, especially if you've gone to any sessions this week. And the idea of this, you know, everything from music notation to audio to DAWs out there, I think is really a really great resource. Back when I first started, everything seemed to be so expensive that I pretty much had to use an academia just because I couldn't afford to get that software and use that software. So I'm happy now that if you want to make a makerspace, that you're able to use this as well. So you don't need a new computer to create music. You know, the idea of creativity, tenacity, inquiry. And I think about for me, a lot of times the obstacles are nice. If I set an obstacle, like if I write a song, I won't use the word I because it's too easy to talk about myself. And a lot of times when I write a piece of music, I'm only, you know, going to use these sounds here. These limitations, these obstacles, a lot of times help my creativity. And I think in a lot of aspects, using older technology, like, well, what can I do with this? What can I use this for? So all these things, we don't need new technology to be able to do that as well. And really, the idea I talked about before, that I used that old computer to score a film. In 2011, I could do all the things that I pretty much need to do. And actually, I taught piano camp a couple of years back. And as a proof of concept, I used that as the computer to teach, and it was fine. And I'll mention that little short film that I scored. Some MIDI controllers. Y'all remember Rock Band a couple of years back? I love that guitar controller. And pianos, we got so many pianos out there, and they made a little guitar also. And it's fun, and you can get a wireless MIDI Bluetooth converter for it, and you have like a little wireless guitar you can run around with, or the guitar as well, or you just hook up a cable, and it has a 5-DIN MIDI cable that you just plug into a MIDI interface, and you can use it, and it's battery powered. Honestly, there's not much latency with it. It works fine, and the cool thing about the guitar, there's actually little buttons you press, so there aren't strings. So to me, I wish they would have kept developing that technology. But sadly, they only made one of them, that version there. I bought a couple of those as backups, so if I have one that fails, I can use them later on. And I think you can see down there that I have a little dongle that's connected to the, I believe, the guitar in that case there. And of course, I talked a lot about this launch pad, which to me, once again, is a new instrument. It really can do a lot of things. So I think it's kind of fun to find these. And I used to pick these up pretty inexpensive at pawn shops. I think they've gone up a little bit in price because they're becoming more rare. But you can still find them. And I find MIDI keyboards. I mean, you can buy a decent MIDI keyboard even for $50, $40 off of Amazon. And that has all the sounds and everything like that. So even if you have it hooked up to a GarageBand or a computer, you can still use it. So that's that $40 Casio keyboard that I talked about and I got off of Facebook Marketplace. And it actually uses the old Android USB connecting, which I don't like because they're not as strong, but it works. So just plug right into GarageBand. I was able to use that. So you can see that there. There I am using Ableton Live at a gig I did one time, and that was fun. Using I think that's a 2012, yeah, it's a 2012 Mac that I talked about. And I kind of talked about one of my areas of research there was diving into using old computers to make music. And that was a really cool challenge. The one thing like this, if you do happen to have an old Commodore 64, the power supplies are a little touchy now, so don't leave it plugged in. Just use it and unplug it. Don't leave it plugged in because it's you can buy new power supplies that they have made that really, if I wanted to, but I just kept on plugging that as well. So the idea of technology changes so fast. I think back in 1984 when I bought that cassette in 1984 for $6 and I think it was 25 cents. If you would tell me today how we get our music data is streaming, I wouldn't even understand that concept at all. And so today, for students that can pay $5 to Spotify, have access to all music they want to, I had to just buy one record. You know, I've only bought, I don't know, 4 or 5 cassettes probably a year. That's all I could afford as a kid. And to me, it's pretty amazing as well. So let me show you, if you all don't mind, let me kind of end this presentation showing you some of the makerspace here at SFA that we have. And there's outside, it's in the library area. I think one of the problems for everybody is finding a space for things. And so hopefully you can find a little space that you put together, a little lab. And there's the little music station that I was able to put together there. You can see the Scarlett down there, the Macintosh, the keyboard there, and the launch pad. And again, my old guitar from a pawn shop. No, that's the sound one. So you hook up microphones to it. It's a Scarlett, yeah. And by the way, I think that's the best interface you can purchase because it just sounds so good in comparison to others. Once again, there's a lot of creativity that the young people were doing to print out 3D printing things. And there's some 3D printers and how they're put together. And to me, it's really fascinating. The wood burners are, people love using those to design things. Like I mentioned, I never thought about printing out 3D printing a chessboard or coming up with their own games themselves, and that was pretty fascinating. This is where they make little pieces, 3D pieces for their games, for table games and whatnot. There you can kind of see some of those little shapes there. And they basically use like light to keep it together and everything. So it's pretty fascinating. And we're lumberjacks at SFA, so they need to have a 3D printer they can put in an X handle, and so you could 3D print your X handles there. So that was kind of cool. And they even have a little recycling where they can recycle the PLA that's not being used. So there's a button and a shirt maker for t-shirts or any type of shirts, I guess. And there's an embroidery machine, sewing machine. Or they use the Cricut there. Yes.
So it looks like a pretty large space. What was there before?
I think that was a place where they had periodicals at, and they moved them somewhere, repurposed this area. These are pretty powerful PC computers for the 3D design. And the space here is used by a lot of students in the art area to come and they come work on their projects. A lot of folks in theater go in there and make props also. So they need a, I don't know, cup or frog or something, whatever. They can go in there and just 3D print it themselves. And a lot of cosplayers go make their costumes or parts of their costumes, which I think is really fascinating as well. So you can kind of see a little bigger parts of the space there. So, and once again, we got two podcast music stations in the Makerspace as well. So, and I think I'm basically, there's me talking to a group of students there about it. And there I was back in the 90s. Yeah. So, you know, what a difference. Time's not kind sometimes. But I guess I'll kind of open it up to any thoughts or questions or observations. Yes.
I have old stuff, of course. I got into this stuff in '85. So I have Commodores and that sort of thing, and synthesizers, Juno 106 and a Core DSS-1 and a little Casio CZ-101 and stuff.
Woo!
Oh, I got it wrong.
I love that one.
And it mostly worked. But my question is, so with the new, so I run the thing, it was off Commodore for the longest, and then I went to some little Apple thing, and that was the latest. The question is, all these synthesizers are single track. You know what I mean? They're not multi. So,
Well, you can still use them as a controller. So you want to use the sounds.
I want to use it as a sound thing. So do these new sequencers, you know, like before. So the Juno was on channel 1.
Yeah, there's two ways you can do it. They had a patch bay back in the day, of course. Probably what I would do is get a Scarlett that had like 8 inputs, and I would just hook the audio out of those synthesizers and just record the audio live. Once you got your sequence done, I would just come out and record the audio live into like Logic or GarageBand or Pro Tools or whatever. So that's probably what I would do. And actually use the audio itself. Yeah. And
mostly recording, but because you'd have to take everything out with you.
yeah. Yeah, performance.
But I'm talking the sequencing. So if I were to create parts, so what? Now I have to
Well,
one track at a time?
yeah. Or they had something back in the day, the SMPTE time code, if anybody remembers that, and so that way it would handshake to know how to sync it up. And I'll be honest, I haven't used SMPTE time code in a long time. If you want, I'll give you my card, and I bet we can brainstorm something, and then I can put my information up as well. I'll put this up here if y'all feel like some links. Some notes from my presentation are on that side there. With my colleague, we did another session earlier, and we had so many cool links, and so I wanted to share like a lot of the software links that current music educators had. So I want to make sure that you will actually have that as well available to you, because it's to me it's pretty interesting to have that. I'm going to just do this real quick because I think it's kind of fun. So I really appreciate y'all spending about an hour with me, listening to me talk about something I'm really passionate about, and I want to thank you all so much. If you want to get in contact with me, there's ways to get in contact with me. I am not hard to find, so I'm happy to answer any emails and talk to you as well. And I'll be around for the rest of the convention if you want to chat with me as well. Yes. Midgley, but you can just call me Herb. Midgley. Yeah, Herb is fine. Yeah. So thank you all again, and I hope you have a good rest of the time here at TMEA. Thank you all so much for coming out.